Hello, this is Mark Walton, and you are listening to the Fulham Focus podcast. Fulham.
Hello, welcome to the Fulham Focus podcast. My name's Matt Boisclair. Tonight I am joined by Will Oakley and Don Love, and we're here to look ahead to Saturday's tasty tie with Blackburn at Ewood Park. But before we do that, Morgan Calton and I spoke earlier in the week about a man who scored a rather special goal in the same fixture 19 years ago.
Fulham.
I'm here with Morgs tonight to talk about Sean Davis, and the first place I normally start with these is I'd normally ask you how you felt when a particular player signed for the club. But Sean Davis rose up through the youth team, established himself in the team, and then went on to play for the club in all four divisions, a feat that nobody else holds. His debut on October the 15th, 1996 at home to Cambridge United went a little bit under the radar at the time, as the club were in the middle of being dragged out of the doldrums by Mickey Adams. But he was the first real homegrown success story of my lifetime, which, looking back, is something I'm quite proud of, given how long he stayed. What about you, mate?
Yeah, very much the same. I mean, as I said, he made his debut fairly quietly at the time. And I think, the same as you, he was the first kind of homegrown player that then went on to stay with the club. And obviously we'll talk about that to go on. But he's one of those players you can look back on with pride. But at the same time, when you look at it, he didn't actually play for us for that long. He's not sort of, someone who's played for 15 years with the club and one club man or anything. But he is just that success story of our academy, which would have been fairly shoestring at the time.
Well, he did stay for 8 years in the end. He made his debut in 1996 and he left in 2004. But I guess those first few seasons, he wasn't really in the team, or he was in and out of the team and just trying to establish himself.
Yeah, it was pretty much, about 5 seasons of solid football.
Yeah, I think so.
So, whereas you can get 5 seasons out of a player without almost even blinking sort of at times, maybe not so much these days, but it seems like a regular amount of time for a player to play without, even becoming a legend. But, he managed to do that. But I think obviously that comes with the fact that, he did play for us in 4 divisions as opposed to just a few seasons in the Premier League.
I guess one thing we'll never know is how his career would have evolved had Fulham not been on such a steep trajectory towards the Premier League at the time. I wonder whether he would have stayed with us if we'd have been kicking around in the bottom division for a few seasons, and whether he'd have just kind of not really grown as a player. Or I think his career was massively helped by the fact that Fulham was so successful at the time. He got to play under the likes of Kevin Keegan. He got to play under Jean Tigana. And then obviously later on Chris Coleman as well. And I really think that he grew with the club. What do you reckon?
I totally agree. I mean, he would have come through our YTS system, which I imagine, wouldn't have been the best in the world at the time, considering how much money we didn't have. And then obviously the coaching of Mickey Adams did wonders for the players at the time. But then to go on to have these, experienced, world coaches involved. If you're a player with a decent amount of talent, then these are the kind of guys that are going to unlock it. And they clearly did. Had it been, the same situation where it just been Mickey Adams for a couple of seasons, and then, had he lost his job and we brought in another sort of Div 3, Div 2 manager, would it have been the same? Probably not. And he, obviously scouting systems work in such a way that teams in the higher leagues would have sent someone along because he clearly had some talent there. And he may have moved on to pastures new well before he did. But obviously we will never know how he would have developed with us had we not been hitting the stratosphere like we did back then.
Yeah, very much so. I was just thinking that at the time that he did come through, I always kind of grouped him and a guy called Luke Cornwall under the same umbrella. Yeah. And Luke Cornwall broke into the team the season after the Mickey Adams promotion. And I think he scored 1 goal in 4 appearances. And I've just brought up his page here, and he's gone on to play 4 games for Fulham, was on loan to QPR and didn't play, played 10 games at Grimsby, 3 at Lincoln, 3 at Bradford, and then dropped into non-league. So his career, given that he was a striker and he scored quite early on, quite a tall striker as well, just took a very, very different path to that of Sean Davis.
Didn't he get 2 in a game against York or something? I seem to remember. I think it was
definitely scored against York. I'm not sure if he got 2 or whether he got 1.
Yeah,
But
I remember that game. But,
it was a ridiculous game where we should have. We took the lead 3 times and ended up just giving away 3 stupid goals, and in many ways quite similar to the Huddersfield game last weekend. Although obviously we didn't concede the 3rd goal, and we went on to win the game. But anyway, I was just going to say as well that after that Mickey Adams season, a lot of players left, and then obviously there was the Al Fayed takeover as well. But Sean survived that, and he made a handful of appearances during the 97-98 season under Ray Wilkins, and then the 98-99 promotion season under Kevin Keegan as well, before beginning to get a few more games throughout 99-2000 under Paul Bracewell. And whilst that season wasn't the greatest, as we finished mid-table, he did get the experience of playing alongside Lee Clark, and I think that was another real kind of stepping stone for his career. What do you think?
I mean, Lee Clark was one of those players that if you're a young, upcoming midfielder and you have the opportunity to play next to him, he's the kind of ideal player to be playing next to. He was great. He was a great servant for most of the clubs he went to. I think he pissed off the Sunderland fans a bit, but from our point of view, we saw some of the best football from him. And if you're Sean Davis and you get drafted into the team, there is a pressure to perform up to his level. And he certainly started doing that. And I think, had it been anyone else, for example, I think Kevin Ball was in there the season before. He certainly got a few games, didn't he? Can you imagine trying to learn from Kevin Ball?
Yeah.
So, instead of having Lee Clark as opposed to anyone else, as well as John Collins the next season, you're going to learn a hell of a lot as a player, and it's going to only aid your development.
We talk about that next season when John Tigana came in. He transformed not only the way we play, but our approach to training and also diet and all sorts. He just transformed the club completely. But it was him that really made Sean Davis a regular starter during that season when we were promoted to the Premier League, and he took to that seamlessly.
Yeah, and also the fact is Tigana came in, changed the style of football we were playing completely. Obviously saw something in terms of the youthful sort of youthful vigour that Davis offered in compared to sort of John Collins or the experienced heads of Goldbeck and Clark, and it added something to the team which we didn't need to go out and shop for, which, considering how much money we'd been spending, was great, because it just allowed us to have that person on the pitch who knew the club, knew the fans, and it just added that little something to the team that, had it been just a all off the shelf bought team, may have not been quite the same. But I think what he did with him was, took a player who was, we've used the term a few times for AK, was certainly a rough diamond, and polished him completely. Yeah,
and also you say about how we didn't really spend a great deal of money that summer. We had been quite heavy spenders as we were coming up from the what is now the League One, so Division 2 back. And the season that Tigana came in, you're right, we didn't really do a great deal of business. As you say, I think John Collins came in maybe on a free transfer, a couple of £1 million on Louis Saha. And I think we loaned in Lewis Bowen-Morte as well. But we already had Barry Hales, Mike Taylor, Chris Coleman, etc. But like you say, Sean Davis was already at the club, and he was just given his opportunity. And for me, that season under John Tigana, there were 2 moments that clearly stand out towards the end of that season, which we're going to talk about obviously very shortly. But earlier on that season, in the December, there were also 2 stunning strikes away at West Brom and Preston, both from distance and both giving the keeper no chance, proving that he could certainly hit the ball.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was one of his things, wasn't it? He was a great combative midfielder, but at the same time, he had a decent right peg on him. And that it was just another part of his game that was great to see. And it wasn't, scoring wasn't his strong point, but it's certainly something he had in his locker. And sometimes when you get a player like him, you go, he doesn't score enough goals, but he did score a few. So, we can't look too badly on that.
You're right, though. Scoring isn't necessarily one of his main strengths. However, the two of the goals that he did score, the things that he's most fondly remembered for and famous for within our fan base, certainly. But that season, in many ways, he was the perfect foil for Lee Clark, who we've already spoken about, because he was playing in a more defensive role whilst Lee Clark got forward. And I don't know whether this is a fair comparison or not, but I was thinking earlier who in our current squad he was most like, and I just put here that he was like a more mobile and agile Josh Onomer, who enjoyed a tackle but did weigh in with some goals. Do you think that's fair, or do you think that's off the mark?
I would suggest it's possibly a little bit too early, but I get where you're coming from, and I think in terms of seeing how Onomer's playing, because obviously Onomer started off fairly sort of averagely and was not quite sure what he was doing in the team. He's had a few strong performances since then, but again, recently, has he tailed off a bit? I mean, maybe a bit unfair, but I think maybe the idea is right. He likes to get forward a bit. He wanders around, he hammers around the pitch, gets stuck in when need be. I think the comparison could be there, but I need to see more from Onomer to justify being compared to Davis at the moment.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, well, let's come on to it then. Let's discuss the goal for which he's most famous for, Blackburn away. During that season, Fulham and Blackburn had been 1 and 2 all season long. We'd been 1 and they'd been 2. Graham Souness was Blackburn boss, and he was adamant that despite eating our dust all season, that his side were the best side in the division. We got to Ewood Park, and Matt Jansen gave Blackburn an early lead. And then, of course, Rufus Brevett was sent off for us before half-time. But then, just on half-time, Louis Saha equalised when Brad Friedel collided with one of his defenders trying to catch the ball and just dropped the ball right onto his toe. And it was 1-1. In the second half, we then spent the whole of the match defending. I think Blackburn had the ball everywhere but the net. They hit the crossbar. And then right up until injury time. Remind me what happened then, Morgs.
Yeah, I'm going back 19 years in my head, which is a long time. I remember where it was when I was watching it. I seem to remember and the ball came in from the left. I can't remember who from, but Davis kind of found himself in space where he shouldn't have had any space, just outside the 6-yard area, I guess it was, a little bit towards penalty spot, and just pressure the world on his shoulders, calm as you like, banged it straight in. And I think probably the Blackburn fans were more shocked than anything, having seen what they'd just seen for the previous 45 minutes. I think it was the only time that Tigana really showed any emotion at the side of the pitch. He's sort of running down to celebrate with them. It was almost like, do you remember Mourinho celebrated at Old Trafford when Porto won there? And
that's right.
Yeah, and then obviously we got the dance, which could go down as one of the worst dances ever. But I mean, whatever. It was I think one of those. It was one of those moments, I think, when you would forgive any form of a sort of bad dancing or whatever, just because it was such a. I guess for the players as well, just the release of emotion after such a hard game, and also having had Souness mouthing off as he does for the days before it. And to do that and effectively seal the championship, it was a pretty amazing moment.
It really was.
For the players, it must have been amazing.
Definitely. I was in the away end that night, and I have never cheered a goal more in my life than that goal. We were whistling when the ball was in our penalty area for the final whistle. Come on, we've got a great point here, And everyone was just in complete and utter disbelief when we broke away and scored. And I remember there was a moment where I thought it was going to be disallowed. And I remember just looking over to the linesman thinking, he's surely offside. And just couldn't believe it. I was hugging strangers. And then during the drive home, I just felt sick from where I shouted so much. I'd given myself such a sore head. I've never had that since, but it was well worth it. And just remember singing "Soonest, how'd you feel?" as we were leaving the ground. I've always hated that prick, and I love rubbing that into him. Utter arsehole, that bloke. So that's Blackburn, who of course we are playing this weekend. Couple of days later, so that was the Wednesday. On the Saturday, we went to Huddersfield, and of course we were promoted. We weren't promoted at Blackburn. We were promoted at Huddersfield on the Saturday with a 2-1 win. And then we had a chance to win the title the following Monday when we played Sheffield Wednesday at home. All we needed was to get a point. And for some reason, Tigana gave Marcus Hanneman, our US reserve goalkeeper, a start. And he let one in through his fingers from a corner in the first few minutes. But then we left it late to grab the equaliser. But bloody hell, who went and got the equaliser? It's only Sean Davis again, right in the 94th, 95th minute. Spun on the penalty spot and stuck it in the top corner. Do you remember that goal?
I do. I remember I was in the hammy end, quite low down, just behind the goal. So I'd been right there when Hanneman had dropped his clanger, it was just I think he just punched into the goal. I think, didn't he? He just I mean, he shouldn't have been on there really with the sort of game like that. But at the end of the day, the guy makes his own ammo, so you're going to argue with him. But then, I remember with the ball just pushing. The end of that season was quite weird because once we'd actually beaten Huddersfield, the pressure was off, and there were about, I think, 3 games out of the last 4 that finished 1-1. So clearly the pressure had sort of risen off the players, whereas all the other teams wanted to beat us still. And I just remember that ball flying in, and just obviously the championship was sealed. Shawnee running off, shirt off, and
kind of dance again.
More dancing, topless dancing this time. So dancing and a booking. But
of course.
It was it's quite funny thinking back that far though, because it was all that innocent childhood watching sort of football, sort of happiness. And nowadays, I'm like, oh god, just like would it be the same outpouring of emotion, or would it be very different? I guess, right. But it's it was a fun time, and it was such a fun season as well. And I think it was the perfect way to go up as champions, even if it wasn't a win. It was just that 95th minute equaliser. So.
Well, so many of us Fulham supporters who have been around a little while just grew up in real grim times, and it was just the norm to go and watch Fulham and just know we were going to be shit and know we were going to get beat. So to then go full circle and see us just steamroller our way through the football leagues, singing "You'll Never Play Us Again" in some godforsaken northern towns and really pissing off the locals. And then going and sealing this championship with over 100 points. And, of course, we won the league with 4 games to go as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was saying, the first season I started going, I was 11. And it was the season that we were, at one point 91st in the league. So in that space of 6 years, I'd seen it all. And I'd only, and I was still not even 18 yet. It was just like, it was somewhat unbelievable at the time. And we were spoiled, especially when you're looking at it from, young eyes. You're seeing everything going on. You can't think back to the days of Haynes and Cohen and, seeing Best and Moore play because, wasn't born. But in this case, it was hitting those heights after such, an exciting ride. And then you're thinking, what's going to happen next? We're going to be the Manchester United of the South if Al Fayed's right. So, but it was, That
never quite materialised, did it?
Well, it depends if you think about Manchester United then or now, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true.
Very much United of the South at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Sean Davis went on to become a regular for us in the Premier League until he left in 2004. How well do you think he did? Do you think he exceeded expectations?
I don't know. I think expectations were pretty high on him. He went on. He did pretty well. I think he got Player of the Season, didn't he? In one of the Coleman seasons, maybe.
Yeah, I think actually.
And so he did very well. Obviously he attracted interest from, I think it was Middlesbrough and Everton back then. So, solid mid-table teams without attracting anything too exciting. But and then obviously he got slightly disgruntled there. I'm not quite sure what the reason was, but obviously maybe his agent had a word in his ear as he get more money at Everton, because he handed in a transfer request, didn't he? At one point.
Yes, he did.
But then he got injured, and then he retracted his transfer request, and they signed a new contract, which may have been the fact that he wanted to show a bit of loyalty to Fulham, or maybe he just got offered a better, better money, and thought that maybe his injury had held him back a bit. You never really know. You never know what happens behind closed doors, especially when you've got an agent in your ear. And so it was kind of a mixed time, because obviously he was playing very well. He was influential on the team, but then there was obviously this rough spot, as you get that with players though, don't you? You do get players who handed a transfer request because they think they can sort of advance their career, but they're retracting, going to have a long and fruitful career with that club. But obviously he didn't stay too much longer after that.
Now you mentioned that Everton thing, I remember it, and I had forgotten about it, but I remember at the time when he did eventually leave in 2004 to sign for Spurs, I remember being really pissed off. And I always remembered it being because a couple of weeks or maybe even a few days before he left, he was quoted as saying, the squad's really coming together, really looking forward to getting the season started. And then he left, and I was really annoyed. But I think that Everton piece as well just added fuel to that fire. He came back with Spurs to play against us a few months later, and I think we won 2-0. And he was given quite a frosty reception when he got on the ball. Do you think that was deserved?
I don't think he conducted himself in a particularly good way before he left. It was all very insincere when he was talking about, as he said, saying how exciting it was into the season. Obviously, it was a bit of a weird time with Coleman coming in place of Tigana, because it seemed very much like the cheap option with him. Rather, it seemed like the days of, bringing in the world-class players was long and truly over at that point. And, but at the end of the day, players who come back, if they haven't left with the blessing of the fans, as in this case it was, they're always going to get a frosty reception. It may be friendly banter, but they're not going to, do anything other than boo most of the time.
Yeah.
So whether it's deserved, no, probably not, because he served us so well during his years. But unsurprising, probably not.
I think back then as well, Spurs, it was obviously, playing for Spurs was obviously a bigger deal than playing for Fulham for a professional footballer. But Spurs weren't the successful team that are now challenging or have been challenging.
They're still not successful. They just, they get nearer.
Yeah, that's exactly. They were even further off then, though, weren't they? So I don't know. Anyway, I don't mind admitting that I booed him, and I was really annoyed when he left. But of course, then in 2008, he's playing for Portsmouth on the last day of the season of the Great Escape. We win 1-0. Everybody's in a brilliant mood. Everyone's had a few beers, celebrating, and the Portsmouth players are doing their lap of honour. And we're all singing "There's Only One Sean Davis" as he's walking past us. So everyone forgot about it that day. And I think a lot of that, I don't know, that nasty feeling. Yeah, the animosity was just forgotten. But
it does, though, doesn't it? Really... It does with most players once they've been gone a while. You sort of forget about it, and then especially when they've moved on, because obviously he didn't have the best time at Spurs. He's gone on to sort of have a bit more of a career with Portsmouth. You kind of just hope for the best for him, really, because you want to see players from your club do well. At the same time, in a few years' time, we'll look at Sessegnon, where he is. We want him to do well, because it shows it's a kind of a pride thing, isn't it? So I think, especially when he was at Portsmouth and he moved on, you kind of want him to make sure he fulfills his career or fulfills his potential, even if it is away from the club.
Yeah, that's true. He went on to play, as you say, Portsmouth and then Bolton and then Bristol City, but he really suffered with injury. But at Portsmouth, the week after the Great Escape game, when we played against them, he went on to lift the FA Cup with Portsmouth. So, I'm looking back now, I'm really pleased that he did that.
Yeah, I think it's good for any player to at least win one bit of silverware. Oh, well, obviously, he already won the Intertoto Cup, so I mean, I'm not quite sure what he was.
Yeah, of course he did. Yeah, wonder which one he holds in higher regard. Probably the Intertoto Cup, I would have thought.
Probably. I think you could. The thing is, you could fit the Intertoto Cup in the FA Cup, so it's
yeah, like a little Russian doll. No one seems to give a shit about the FA Cup anymore anyway, least of all Liverpool have stuck out their reserves tonight, and Jurgen Klopp hasn't even bothered turning up. So, I bet if it was the Intertoto Cup, Klopp would be all over it.
It's Europe. You know what they think about Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sean's now back working for Fulham, of course, and he's had a variety of roles. He was the co-commentator with Jim McGully a few seasons ago. Now he writes a piece for the Fulham website. Good to see him back, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. I think he obviously he moved on long ago, but Fulham is his home. From a point of view, he grew up in the area, and so he clearly has some emotional ties to the club. And I played with him in a match at the Cottage back in, when was it, 2014?
Clang. Here we go.
Being out the big guns.
We just picked that one up for you, mate. Go on, tell us what was this about? I don't know about this. Go on.
So we were sponsored by Marathon Bet, and it was the season we went down, but they'd held a competition, and it's basically to play an 11-a-side game at the Cottage. And so I won that. Took someone along with me. We each team had an ex-Fulham player on their side. The other team had Sean Davis, and I had Luis Boamorte on mine.
Oh, nice.
And they kind of retired around the same time, I think. But clearly Sean had kept his fitness better than Luis.
Oh, really?
There was something about. I think obviously they both. It was just a little kickabout. Whereas Sean, you could still see had that sort of sharpness. He still, the kind of professionalism didn't really leave him. Whereas Lewis was kind of floating around the pitch, just a bit of a sort of nice run out in the warm May sun. And it was quite funny. But even, Sean even got he got a bit of an ankle injury during it. He was like, no, don't worry, I'll carry on. And it's like, you don't need to damage yourself just because you've been, hired to play this one little game. But yeah, he was a good lad actually. He had a bit of fun, and it was a good day, that one.
The injury wasn't courtesy of a Morgan Calton, Stefan Johansson-esque tackle, was it?
I'm the king of Stefano shithouse tackles. mainly because I'm not very good, and it's the only way I'm actually going to stop some guy from running through.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't going to bother asking you this, but I think I will anyway. Favourite Fulham moment for Sean Davis? I think I know what the answer is going to be.
I think it's very hard not to say the Blackburn game. It's from. I wasn't at Ewood Park, so I didn't quite get the same feeling that you got from it. But I was watching on TV. But from in the flesh, it was the Sheffield Wednesday game, because obviously that saw us being crowned champions, and it was even later in the game, the Blackburn game, and it was just a brilliant moment, and it was the moment that we knew that we were going to be in the Premier League, and they couldn't have been a better player to have scored the goal that did that. So I will pick the Sheffield Wednesday game as my Shawnee Davis moment of my lifetime.
Fair play, and I'll pick the Blackburn game. But I do want to give a notable mention as well, because I know Danny always goes on about it. The ball that Sean Davis played to Louis Saha at Old Trafford in our first ever Premier League game or Premiership game, played it over the top, and Saha ran onto it and lobbed Bartes. He always mentions that, and it was a fantastic ball that I don't think, certainly we were talking earlier in the week about how Davis and Kearney compare, and I don't think Kearney would have played that ball. Kearney would have run it forward and played it on the ground, but Davis, quick look up, saw Saha was away and just pinged the ball over. Perfect ball. Of course, we 1-0 up at Old Trafford. We went on to lose the game, but it was still a fantastic ball and a great goal anyway. Right, mate, we're nearly done. I just need you to rate Sean Davis's Fulham career out of 10.
Oof. I'm not going to go as generous as I have done in the last sort of couple of things we've done, because I think I've just done 2 keepers so far. I give them 9 and 10 or something like that, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to give them a 7. I thought, I'm going to give them a 7.5 just for those sort of 2 important goals. I think, given the fact that towards the end of his career, he was injured a bit. There was a little bit of, let's call it, petulance in terms of his transfer requests and all that. But I think, he was a great player during his time there. But I think had he stayed a bit longer and maybe seen, a couple more years at the club, see what he could do, I think maybe he would have got up to the 8s and 9s. But in this case, I'll give him a 7.5.
Nice one. I think I will give him an 8 just for the important goals that he scored and the fact that he played in all 4 divisions, and he played in some fantastic seasons in which we amassed a lot of points, but deducting points for the way that he left. But I think 8 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10, around the same kind of mark is a
nice enough, I think.
Fair way to sum him up.
I'm going to be less generous with my offerings from now on, because I thought, a bit over the top with Mike Taylor and Schwarzer.
No.
Harsher critic these days.
No, those 2 players deserved high scores, as does Sean. So good stuff. All right, mate. Thank you for that. I will speak to you soon.
Fulham.
All right, Will. Can you talk me through a Blackburn memory of yours, please?
So the one of the ones that I can remember was in the 16-17 season, where which was the one where we lost to Reading in the playoff semi-final. We won 1-0 away, and it was a 94th minute winner for Kearney. It was quite a scrappy game. I didn't go, but I remember on the highlights, quite a scrappy game. Tackles flying around everywhere. But 94th minute winner, and I think it went to about 98 minutes added time or something crazy like that. But yeah, won the game just about in the end. Hopefully, we should win more comfortably against Blackburn. But that was when we had the likes of Matt Smith was playing, Woodrow playing, Hozabed, I think it is. Christiansen came on in the 90-something minute as well. And yeah, so it was quite a tight game. But yeah, 94th minute winner from Kearney.
What I liked about that game as well was that it was Tom Kearney against his old club, and there was no, I'm not going to celebrate this. He went nuts and celebrated the goal. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to go back a little bit further to the last game of the 2004-2005 season. Fulham won 3-1 on that day. We were well safe already. Steve Malbronk got a couple. Brian McBride got one. Liam Rosinia was sent off, and Van der Sar saved a penalty from Robbie Savage. So it was quite eventful. And I think Liam Rosinia got sent off for an altercation with Savage when he shoved him as well. Sadly, didn't knock him out, but there we go. So yeah, that was a good win on the road in the Premier League, that one. All right. So Don, I'm going to come to you. How do you think we're going to line up this weekend?
I think it's going to be actually interesting to see what Scott does here. Nobody wants to have Scott doing the bingo picking of the team, but we've got a new player possibility that could be coming in and playing center back, so this could be really interesting. Tim Ream, I believe he was only suspended for that one game, if I'm not mistaken. So he's back available. Do you put him in and take Adoy back out? Or push Adoy back out to the side, let Christie hit the pine again. I personally liked Christie in that game, and I thought he actually had a better game than Adoy, so I wouldn't mind Christie staying right where he was with Cav sitting in front of him. And obviously, Tom had a pretty good game, so, we'll keep him on the left and Brian in the back. The question, again, as far as the back goes, is who's going to be the center back pairing?
Long term, I think they're going to be looking at Congolo and Hector.
So I think that's going to be true. And I think, there's a couple of reasons why that's going to be true. Adoy isn't necessarily always consistent. He's more of our utility guy, which is awesome. He can play pretty much anywhere in that back four.
He's a fullback by trade, though. That's
right. Right. But, he is what he is. So, and then you look at Ream. Obviously, he's starting to age out. He's probably starting to think about, okay, and I'm pretty sure I've heard him mention that, he's had some talks with the Columbus Crew. So he's pretty much, I'll bet, looking at his future. And I'll bet you just had this discussion. He's probably going to be along the lines of Brian McBride. He's got young kids. he could be following in Brian's footsteps. Young kids, if he doesn't go now, then he's got to deal with 5 more years in the English system before he can convert to the American educational system. He could be looking at that and saying, well, Brian was smart and he did it this way. I'm going to have to do it like Brian, and I'm going to go for the family. So we could lose him for other reasons than him just saying, you know what, I need to move. My football isn't good enough here, and I'm going to go to the MLS. So I think it's smart that we're starting to plan for the future. If that's the case, we're planning for the future. Kudos to Tony Khan and them. Everybody gives him stick that, he doesn't plan for things properly. He doesn't look ahead. He doesn't do this. I think that's actually smart. So as far as the other lineup, the rest of the lineup, it pretty much picks itself. The question I guess you could have in the midfield is Harry completely fit? And can he take over back from K-Mac, or does K-Mac start again and Harry comes on towards the later part of the game? Other than that, I think it picks itself. Metro will be up top,
Yeah. So I've just written this lineup down quickly whilst you were talking. I've gone Rodak, Adoy at right back, Brian left back, Congolo and Hector as centre backs. 3 in midfield. I think we might see McDonald, Kearney and Stefan Johansson just for a bit of steel. Creativity from Kearney and just
I don't have any problem with that. I don't have any problem with that. I like being a starter.
Well, the only time they've started this season wasn't a win. That was what Stato gave us in his stats the other day. But I still do quite like it, especially for those tricky trips up north where you're going to need a bit of bite and a bit of steel in your midfield. And then I think up front, if as we suspect, Knockhart's still injured, I think it'll be Bobby and Cav either side of Mitro again. I don't see any reason to change those front 3.
I don't see any reason to drop Bobby. I think he's proven he's better at cutting in than he is playing that front man when Metro was gone. And if you saw his movement, even off the ball, I thought he did wonders out there. And luckily, we can drop Cav on the other side, and he does fine. I guess it'll be a toss-up between him and Knockhart for that position, but yeah, I was okay with Cav.
Okay. What about you, Will? Do you think there'll be any major surprises to the lineup, or do you think we've pretty much covered it off?
Yeah, I think you've covered it off. I think Congolo for Adoy would be the only change. Maybe Adoy in for Christie, but I'd like to see Christie, carry on playing. He played quite well against Huddersfield, I thought. I think Congolo could start because I feel like it might be a bit of a scrappy game, to be honest. And Congolo's quite a big player, quite big built. And him and Hector as a partnership, I think, could be good against a team like Blackburn, to be honest. So the only change for me would be Adoy for Congolo.
Okay. Well, the only time we've seen Blackburn this season was when we played them in the reverse fixture. And that was the second game of the season when we beat them 2-0. And I don't really know. I don't remember much about it, to be honest. I don't remember their style. I'll just quickly read off their last few results. Their result of the weekend, they drew 1-1 away at Middlesbrough. Before that, they beat QPR 2-1. But the game before that, on the 18th of January, Sheffield Wednesday 0, Blackburn 5. So they've obviously got something about them because Sheffield Wednesday are not having a bad season this season. And then at the start of the year on New Year's Day, they lost 3-2 at Forest as well. So they are capable of getting a result 100%. So I think we need to be careful here.
Remind me, is this not the team that imploded 3 seasons ago, and went out to League One? Yeah. The goalkeeper didn't even have a jersey for one of the matches. He had to take back a jersey that he had signed from a person. And so, holy shit, it's Blackburn that imploded, and now they've crawled out of the gutter, and they're buying 6 points off of the being in promotion contingency. I mean, that's kind of amazing, actually, in my mind, at least.
Well, you might say it's even more amazing that they dropped down as far as League One when they were winning the Premier League in 1994. But anyway,
I mean, I'm sorry. It's kind of. I'm not a Blackburn fan. I don't know shit about them. But it's kind of neat to see a club implode and not just completely disappear, Yeah. Portsmouth, they imploded financially and everything. And I don't know, they're still in Sunday League for all I know, non-league. Blackburn's, they've crawled up. They're coming back.
Portsmouth are only in League One. I think they almost came up last season. They're on their way back. It's good. It's good to see because it's not the fans that ruin clubs. It's owners and
exactly
the bad running of clubs. So it's
so you feel bad for clubs that have this situation where the owner won't even give them enough damn money that they've got a second kit for the fucking goalie. So
exactly,
good for them that they came back like that. Now, with that said, you talk about the previous results for them. Sitting at home, they've become a fortress. Let me look at stats here. I'm pretty sure they haven't lost but 2 games or something? Yeah, 2 games. They've only lost 2 games since this season being at home. And Stato says, that those games were actually against bottom of the table teams. So go figure. That explains this league again. There's no explaining it. But yeah, they've had some fantastic wins. They're currently sitting in 10th, 6 points off playoffs, like we said. Their record is 12 wins, 10 losses, 8 draws. So, they're winning and drawing more than they're losing, which isn't necessarily good for us going up there, sadly. So I agree with our lineup. You're going to need some grit. You're going to need some people who dig in and take some shit, and give it back. And Steph Joe's definitely going to give it right back. So.
Well, let's really quickly focus on Tom Cairney because he's once again back against his old club. He scored a worldie against them earlier in the season, pinged one in the top corner. He's got quite a habit of scoring against them. Will, do you expect a big performance from him this Saturday?
Yeah, I think he has to play like he did against Huddersfield rather than how he did against Charlton. Like Don was saying in the Huddersfield reaction, that the off-the-ball runs, we need to see more of them making space in the midfield because it's not all about when you do have the ball, but when he does have the ball, he can ping an absolute amazing pass and have some absolutely amazing shots with what looks to be an impossible position to shoot from, and that's the Cairney that we need to see. I think he has to play well, otherwise we're not. He's a key part of that midfield, and if he doesn't play well, then we're in trouble, really.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we've got Stato's stats in front of us. Don, you've already alluded to them a little bit so far, but I'm going to come to you and just ask you to talk to us a bit about Blackburn and their form this season.
Well, like I said, their home form, they've been doing phenomenal. They've only lost to 2 teams, Charlton and Luton, when at home. So it's going to be a tough nut to crack, I think, going up there. They won their last match home match against QPR. But before they had that or did that, they had 3 consecutive draws. So if nothing else, hopefully, we're going to at least dig in and get a draw, which at this point in the season, we've got to be consistent and start getting points out of every match. Scrap it out, dig it out, and get the points. They do like to concede, on average, 0.87 goals per game at home. So that's in our favor. They've had 6 clean sheets, though, in their last 15 home games. So, obviously they've got something going on at home with that defense. It's working and it's doing pretty well. If they are going to concede, it tends to be in the second half. And this is where Stato says they tend to concede like 62% of their goals in the second half. So we need a tale of no first half, no second half. We need just the consistency throughout the match that we are there and we're dug in.
Good stuff. All right, mate. Well, Will, talk to us about Blackburn's key players this season.
So they've got quite a few creative players, but we'll get on to them. The defence, so Elliot Bennett is a right back and he's contributed 4 assists from there. And 39% of Blackburn's attacks come down from the right side. So they'll be testing Joe Bryan's defence. So Christian Wharton, the goalkeeper, is the only player to have played every game in the league for Blackburn. And Lenihan, who's a centre-back, has played most games out of all available centre-backs. However, he's only 178 centimetres tall and Mitrovic is 189 centimetres tall, which most likely means that Adarabioyo will probably play next to him because he is 196 centimetres tall, which is absolutely massive. And a few of the attacking players...
Who knew Stato had a tape measure?
Yeah, exactly. Tape measure Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
We're going to leave it at that. We're going to leave it at that. He's got a technique, okay? Drop it. Sorry, Stato.
So a few of the attacking players, Adam Armstrong plays kind of the right attacking midfield. He's got 8 goals and 6 assists, and he's their main attacking threat. They usually play a 4-2-3-1 with Armstrong out on the right. However, last game against Middlesbrough, he did play in the striker role. Now, Bradley Dack, who is their top scorer with 9 goals and 1 assist, was like kind of the team was very much built around him. But he's been out injured since December and will be out for the rest of the season. And they've only won 2 out of 8 games since his injury, which is in our favour. And a former Fulham player, Lewis Holtby, who did look like he was onto a good career at one point, but no disrespect to Blackburn, is now playing for Blackburn. He's got 3 goals and 2 assists and has filled in for the injured Dack. So he's coming midway through the season to kind of replace him.
I didn't realise Lewis Holtby was at Blackburn, actually. It completely passed me by. He was one of our better players in the season that we went down with Felix Magath, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I think he went to Germany, if I'm correct.
He was at Hamburg, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. And he looked like kind of, a massive wonder kid, and looked like he was gonna kind of be the next big thing. And I think quite a few big clubs were interested in him, but obviously that didn't go to plan.
I think I was quite keen for him to stay if we'd stayed up that season, but obviously at that time with his career just in its ascendancy, there was never any chance of him staying. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Hopefully he has an absolute nightmare.
Hopefully, yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, we're just going to have a look back very briefly at the corresponding fixture at the Cottage earlier in the season. We said that we won that game 2-0. Fulham had 60% possession in that game, which is slightly higher than our 59.4% season average. We had 83% pass succession and 12 shots on goal, but only 2 of them were on target, which were the 2 goals. Blackburn had no shots on target, which means that neither keeper actually made a save in that game. The stat of the day was that Bettinelli had 41 touches. Knockaert only had 37 and went off in the 84th minute. So God knows what Knockaert was doing for the other 84 minutes of the game. It was, as I said earlier, it was only the second game of the season. It was a Fulham debut for Harry Arter and both Harrison Reed and Bobby Decordova-Reid. And 51% of Blackburn's attacks came from the right-hand side of the pitch, which means that the other 49% either came down the left or through the middle. So potentially they could be targeting our left side, which, as in the past we've talked about, is potentially the weaker side, with Joe Bryan often spending a lot of his time up the pitch attacking. So we'll see how that works out for them. Hopefully it'll be another day, though, where Blackburn have no shots on target and we'll score a couple of goals and then no one will care. All right. Speaking of which, I'm going to come to you first, Don. Let's have a score prediction from you, please, sir.
I think it's going to be down and dirty. We're going to get lucky, be 1-1. We're going to get 1 point out of this. We are going to get a point out of it.
Okay. And what about you, Will?
I'm actually quite confident for this game. I think it'll be 3-1. I think we could probably concede a scrappy goal. But yeah, I think I have faith in Mitrovic. The fact that he's, a big, strong striker, like we're saying, there's someone, absolutely massive player in a centre back. But I think, like I was saying earlier, it's going to be a gritty match. And I think with Mitrovic's strength and McDonald's a big player, and if Congolo plays with Hector, that's 2 really strong centre halves, and I think it's going to be 3-1.
Okay, I'm going to go 3-1 as well. Let me put this to you though. So it's Blackburn away this weekend, and then Millwall away on the Tuesday. What would you be happy with out of those 2 games in terms of points, Don? Would you be happy with a 4-point return from those 2 games, or 6?
Absolutely, nope, 4 points. I could see as we did get hard. We get the 1 point Blackburn, but then we go and we destroy Millwall, hopefully, and get all 3. 4 points.
It's 2 tough away games, though.
It is very tough. It is very tough, and that is a very close time frame, to prepare, recover. So that's the championship.
As soon as we don't win a game there, the knives tend to come out for Scott Parker. And, a point at either one of those games, as long as we back it up with a win in the other one, that's got to be a good return. And, Leeds and West Brom and Forest are starting to drop points here and there. So you just got to keep going along with the points.
We got to keep plugging. Got to keep plugging. That's all we can do. Keep plugging away. And this is where, in this division, you've got to get stuck in and you've got to get a point here and there wherever you can. And that's the bottom line. We've got to just dig in. So,
what about you, Will? What about you? How many points would you be happy with?
Yeah, I think 4 out of 6 would be a good return. Not amazing, but I think if we draw at Blackburn, I think we have to win the Millwall match. But if we win at Blackburn, I would expect another win at Millwall, because if we're suddenly on good form, we've won at home against Huddersfield, gone up to Blackburn and won, and then it's away against Millwall, we're on good form. If we're then going back to a draw, it could lead to a set of bad results, and it's at this point of the season where we need to start. I've said it before. We need to start capitalising on the mistakes that Leeds and West Brom are making, because if we don't start pushing into their top 2 soon, we're not going to do it.
And there's the end of this season, the run of fixtures, it's going to be a tough set.
Yeah.
Thing is, we are going to lose. We are going to lose games this season.
There's no getting around it. People can't say we're not.
Unless we go on a Slavica Jokanovic-inspired unbeaten run again, we're going to lose games, and it's going to be disappointing when we lose those games. But we're just going to have to suck it up and get on with it, because the other teams around us are going to lose as well.
Well, and if we not only need to just suck it up and realize we're going to lose, we need fans to just suck it up and say, okay, we can't be calling for Parker's head every time we fucking lose.
Yeah, completely.
At this point in the game, you got to stick with the guy that's there. Okay, I'm sorry. We can't just go changing willy-nilly now, okay? So get behind the guy. Let him do what he's doing, okay? He's not going to change. We all wish he'd change a little bit, but he is who he is, and it's doing pretty damn good so far if you look at the stats and where we are.
We're third, and we're within touching distance of the top 2. Yet people call for his head. It's bananas. It really is crazy.
So, yes, he's frustrating. I mean, God, he's been frustrating to me. Some of the shit he pulls, like Man City. Okay, we're not going to talk about that, but still, I'm not calling for his fucking head every 5 seconds. So,
yeah. All right, well, let's end it there. I think
that's
a good place to end it. Nice one, lads. Thanks for joining me for this one, and also thanks to Morgs earlier on for the Sean Davis chat. We'll be back in a few days' time to look back at the game, and with a bit of luck, we'll be talking about a big Fulham win. See you soon. Cheers.
Fulham.